All right, today we're going to take a look at regular expressions. Regular expressions are ways that we can define patterns, and for our benefit, we're going to use them mostly for validation. But you can also use them, as we've already done in our date validation, for string replace. And you can also use it for searching techniques that we'll learn about either today or next time, that describe how we can go through a big old long string and find every occurrence of a particular pattern, match it, save it as an array. Regular expressions are defined using control characters. So there's a bunch of it's a language all its own, a pattern matching language. It has a bunch of special characters that have special meaning. We put them together to define a pattern that we want to match. We're going to use it mostly for validation, but you can use it for other things. Just to get started, the backslash character is the exception character. It is used to designate some of the control groups. Backslash D, for instance, represents a digit. Okay, so we don't have to say 0 through 9. We can just say backslash D. The backslash character, however, is also used to remove special meaning from other characters, which we also had to use in our phone number mask, our phone number pattern. We put a backslash in front of the period because the period in regular expressions means any character. So if you actually want to match a period, then you have to escape it, is what most people would say, by putting a backslash character in front of it. But in regular expressions, that backslash character has two purposes: to find certain special groups, and it removes special meaning from any of those characters. Any of our groups can be put in parentheses. Sometimes you want an entire group to be multiplied by 5 times. Put them in parentheses, you can do that. There are two other characters, the caret, shift 6 on your keyboard, and the $sign, that are used in many. I took out the most. I have a new version of these notes, but I haven't had a chance to publish them yet because my O drive got swiped. But anyways, those two characters are used in many regular expressions to make sure that there's no excess characters. So I could define a regular expression that says I need 5 digits. But if you don't define the beginning and the end of the text, that's what those two represent. The caret represents the beginning and the $sign represents the end of the string. If you don't define them, there could be other characters floating around there, and you just match the 5 digits that are stuck in the middle someplace. By adding a caret and a $sign at the end of your pattern, you're basically saying, here's the beginning, then there's 5 digits, here's the end, and there better not be anything else. So I put them in just about all the JavaScript that we're going to be demonstrating here for validation, but if you're doing large numbers of pattern matching, they don't work quite so well. Here's the regular expressions. I'm going to ignore the PHP and the Visual Studio. I think the Visual Studio is fairly current, but the PHP is not. I know a lot of these squirrely square brackets, colon things have gone away. They are probably still valid, but they've been replaced by something much closer to what we have in all of the other languages. Notice the consistency between Visual Studio and JavaScript. PHP is pretty close to that as well. So if you decide you want to build a regular expression in PHP, my first guess would be start with the same set of characters. So as I just said, start with the same characters as JavaScript, see if those work. They probably do. As I just said, the caret designates the beginning of a string. A $sign represents the end of the string. You normally put those on your regular expressions on either end. Caret's first, $sign at the end to say, this is what I want and no more. Now, if all you're looking for is your expression hiding in the middle somewhere, you can leave those out. But most of the time you're trying to match, does this look like a social security number? Does this look like a phone number? If you find the right pattern, you don't want any extra characters floating around. We will often want to repeat a pattern more than one time. To do that, you simply press a number or place a number inside of curly brackets. So if I wanted to do digits, for instance, we learned just a second ago that \D represents a digit. If I want 20 digits, then I would say \d curly brackets 20. So the multiplier comes after. Designate the pattern that you want and then how many. If you want to allow for that to repeat n or more times, so I want at least a 20-digit number, and you use n comma, and it'll take any number with a minimum. So this basically sets a minimum number of whatever n you provide. If you want a number between 10 and 20, you can do that. Another very common occurrence is a question mark that says this is optional. But if you put it in, it better only appear once. So the question mark is used a lot for optional. So is the star. The star says the same kind of thing. This is optional. However, you may put it in as you may match this pattern as many times as you want. These are multipliers in a way, but they don't need the curly brackets. It's just an infinite number of multipliers. Same thing here, but there has to be at least one when you use the plus sign. Next, these are multipliers. Next, we're going to talk about the different kinds of characters and how to select them. A dot represents any character. And I believe that's Unicode. If we get that deep, we're not going that deep, but if we ever needed to get that deep, I believe it includes Unicode characters. If we want to use the SQL in clause, basically, use square brackets. So in the square brackets, I could say ABC, and that would match any one of the three letters. Not in that order necessarily, just any one of the three. And you don't put commas in between, you don't put separators or anything. If you want to match a W, an A, and a T for some reason, you can put them in any order inside the square brackets, and it'll match any one of those. Using the square brackets, we can now create some ranges. First of all, any character, the caret character also represents none. So it has two purposes in life and regular expressions, marks the beginning of the string. And it also means not. So in this case, if the first character inside the group of AWT is a caret, it'll match any letter that is not AW or T. A-Z gives me a range. And if you don't want A to Z, you want some other range, you can. But remember, these are ASCII sequenced. So when you say capital A to little z, that gives you some characters in between. So you have to be careful there. If you want a letter, number, or underscore, use a \W. Where would you ever want a letter, number, or underscore? Variable names. Why would I be writing a regular expression to check to make sure something's a legal variable name? I wouldn't. Haven't used that one. This is the reverse. Often you'll find that whatever this is, mostly this is letters, right? But it does include numbers and underscores. This is everything but that. The capital letter is the opposite of the lowercase letter. So here's any digit. Here's anything that's not a digit. If we want all the letters and digits, no underscores, we have to list them separately. Notice there's a range. These are inside a square bracket, so that's an in clause. It's either in A to Z or 0 to 9. The older versions of PHP had a specially defined alphanumeric class, but that was a real pain to put into your PHP with all those double square brackets and a colon. All that was necessary to use those things, and I think they've gone away. Just the letters, just the lowercase letters, just the uppercase letters. Special code for white space. It includes tabs, spaces, carriage returns, vertical tabs, any white space, and then any non-white space. So that's all characters except those white space characters. And if you want a choice of patterns, either this pattern or that pattern, you put one vertical bar in between. And you can have 3 of them, or 4 of them, or 5 of them, or however many you match, or however many you wish. So you can say it has to match this pattern, or it has to match that pattern, or the next pattern, and then you can put a knot around the whole thing, put parentheses on it, put a multiplier on it, and creates some very, very complex, as you'll see in the homework assignment, very, very complex regular expressions. Here's some simple ones. Here's a phone number that first starts out. And notice, and that's the one thing, where was that designated? I didn't hear. It must be coming a little later. How do you designate a regular expression? I wouldn't put that up in there somewhere. Where did I read that? Sorry, it must still be coming. To define a regular expression in JavaScript, you simply put 2 slashes as part of a variable. Now I did that and I had the debugger going, and when I touched on pattern, it told me that it was a regular expression type. So there's no quotes, it's just a slash and a closed slash. Here's the beginning of my pattern, there's the end of my pattern, the $sign. And then this says any character, and the star means 0 or more. So this is a anything pattern. And you'll actually see it in my sample because I put some placeholders in for us to fill in. And I wanted to match anything. That pattern matches anything. In Visual Studio, you have to include the regular expression class. And then once you do that, the regular expression goes into a string with an ampersand in front that removes any special meaning from the characters like backslashes. So in Visual Studio, put quotes around it. But we're in JavaScript. So whenever we define our patterns, we simply put slashes and then the pattern in between. So here's those patterns again. Start with slashes. These are all JavaScript patterns. This is the beginning of the string, meaning there shouldn't be anything before my 3 digits. So I should start my string that I'm trying to match, must start with 3 digits, followed by a dash. The dash has no special meaning, so it's just a character. It has to appear. Followed by 3 more digits and a dash. This could actually be simplified because that's a pattern of 2, right? It's the same thing twice. It could be simplified a little bit by putting parentheses around the first pattern and then a multiplication factor of 2 after that. But it's a phone number. We all recognize phone numbers. 3 digits followed by a dash, 3 digits followed by a dash, followed by 4 digits. And again, the $sign means nothing more. If you leave those out and then there's a phone number with stuff around it, it'll still match a phone number. It'll find it. So often, just like in programming, there's more than one way to define a pattern. This works. Everybody recognizes it, though it could be simplified just a little bit by saying I want 2 of these. Put that in parentheses, put a curly brackets 2 after it, and we'd have the same pattern. Here's an example with credit cards. There's the parentheses. I have a pattern of 4 numbers followed by a dash. And that happens 4 times, right? No, 3 times, because the dash is included. The last set of 4 digits do not include a trailing dash, so they have to be isolated. Again, I could turn this around, right? Say it's 4 digits followed by a dash followed by 4 digits 3 times. So that's your typical credit card. Now, you may know more about credit cards than I do and what some of the special meanings are about the numbers. And my Discover card starts with 1 number, and Visa cards start with a different number. You can get into it pretty deep if you want to. And finally, there's a zip code pattern. The zip code is 5 digits, followed by a dash and 4 digits, but the question mark means optional. 0 or 1. Optional, same thing. Okay. But different than a star, because a star would say I could have lots of dashes and 4 digits, and that's not the case there. There should only be 1 set. So those are some simple examples. We're going to do a few more in our in-class example, and there's a few more simple ones for you to do in your homework assignment. And then I ask you, if I remember right, I haven't looked at the assignment, but I'm pretty sure I ask you to go out and find your own. Do some research. Find your own pattern to represent something that we would commonly want to search for so that we'll have those patterns if we need them. All right, we already talked about that. PHP is still kind of blank. How do we know, how do we use these? Typically we use them in an if statement. Here, we put in a pattern. That's a pattern variable. So we create a variable, call it pattern, assign it a regular expression, which has the 2 slashes, beginning and the end, and then take that variable and run the test method against it and use our string inside the parentheses. This returns either true or false. We're testing this string against that pattern. Does it match? At least once. If it does, this function test returns true, otherwise it returns a false. So let's go into our code. And the easiest one to do is the section number, so let's go there. I'm going to open up the section number, and I already have a big chunk of all this code written. All we have to do is fill in the regular expression, because right now it says 1 or more characters. Now it's plus sign. In my notes it was a star. And then what I forgot when I was practicing is there's also an if statement that I have to put in here to see if it matches. So let's start with a pattern. I want a pattern for a mid-state section number that's 5 digits. That's all there is. So that's a \D for digits. And then in curly brackets, a 5. And so what you have to do is get your head around what the pattern is. Notice I've assigned that to a variable. Couldn't I have just done it up here at the same time? Probably could have. Sure, I could have. But what I don't think you can do, I haven't tried it, and it would be very confusing, is to have this pattern with its slash immediately followed by a dot. Because that's what I want to do next. I want to test to see if my text that the user has typed has matched. So this variable called not valid doesn't really exist. Or does, it's global. I'm just using it as a placeholder here. And as we just saw in the notes, to test that, we use our pattern first. So that's pattern for credit card number, no, for section number. Dot test. And then in parentheses, the string that we want to test against that pattern. That's my PTR value. So I have this section number on my form, and it's the first one on the form. These should already be wired. I just need to turn on my Firebug to make sure that that's working. And where did my browser go? Way over here. Okay. And so now I can save that, and I should be able to test it. So here it's even showing me already with a placeholder text that I expect 5 digits. But if I type in some junk, couldn't I put a key press in here? Probably should. Would my pattern still make sense? Kind of. I can still I can still use my pattern against a field where I can guarantee there's nothing but digits because I used key press. What would it do? Check my length to make sure it's exactly 5. That's what the pattern said, 5 exactly digits. Couldn't I just look at the length of the value and see if it's equal to 5? Absolutely. This is another technique. If I put my numeric key press in here, it kind of wipes out the need for this technique, and I don't have too many solid examples without it.
Doesn't it have to be not at per section number dot test?
Thank you. If it's not, if it doesn't pass the test, then yell at it. That's correct. Thank you. I can still type a bunch of stuff in here as soon as I leave. Missed. My error marker there in hiding? No. Do I have a Firebug error? Didn't save this one, that's why it's not working.
Line 156 has an error.
Oh, that's right, I forgot about that. Line 156 has an error left over from before, so if you scroll down to that line number, there's an extra parenthesis in it. Just take that out. Right there. That's in my master. I forgot. I ran out of time. I had all kinds of great plans for this afternoon. It didn't work out that way. All right, save one more time. And refresh the page. And if I leave the field now, I still don't get an error message. Still got a Firebug bug. Curly bracket, pattern for test value.
I think you're missing a parenthesis on 114.
If pattern, yep. Another Volcker standard. Thank you. Okay, there's my error marker. Would be a little easier to see. There we go. Touch it, say it doesn't match the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4 doesn't match the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 does match the pattern. And just to be sure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters does not match the pattern. That's one way to check for a match. The other way, and this is what I was working on before I was interrupted so that I was late for class and all kinds of other stuff. The other way in my notes is to use the match one. This is the one you'll find most often when you're searching, is how do I match a pattern, because that's what people say. The test works. I like test because it's real quick and it's true false only. That's all I get. You can also do a pattern match using the match method, but notice that this method doesn't apply to the pattern, it applies to the string. And I couldn't get this to work because I was doing it exactly the same way. I just took out the word test and put in the word match, and that ain't going to work. Because here we have to look at a string to see if it matches a pattern. Reads real nice. So let's give that a try.
Are those functions built into JavaScript?
Yes, none of those are mine. So I'm going to take this one out, comment it out, so that we can see that that works. And then up here, put in an if parentheses not. But now I have to start with the string, ptr.value.match parentheses the pattern. See if that works. According to the definition, if a pattern exists, if there's text that matches that pattern, it will return it to you. The text. And if I remember right, it also returns where it found it. We'll look at that in a minute. But if it doesn't find it, it returns null, which in JavaScript can be analyzed as false. So if it's not there, that's really what we're interested in, is if it's not there, this should still work. So I'm going to save that, and I'm telling you I'm in uncharted waters now. Refresh this page. And let's try 1, 2, 3, 4. Not good enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Seems to work. And this was not working before. It is for me now, at least. So either one of these techniques allows you to test a string to see if it matches a pattern. One checks a pattern to see if it matches a string. And the other checks a string to see if it matches a pattern. You just got to keep the two straight. When I was doing a little research, this match will return other things if you ask it to. You can find out how many times it was there. You can find out where they were found, at what positions in case you need it. So that's another thing that regular expressions can be used for. Here's a big old long paragraph full of text. Find the first occurrence of JavaScript and tell me where it is. use a pattern instead of some of the built-in string functions. Instead, the nice thing about patterns is it has the ability to return multiple. Here's how you do it in Visual Studio. I think this is C#, but not positive. All right, now we're supposed to copy the code to validate the phone. So let's go validate the phone number. I think my mouse has finally given out on me here. Here's my phone number. And in my notes, I had a pattern, which was just, let's try to improve on that pattern. It was 3 digits. So that's \D curly bracket 3. That whole pattern multiplied by 2, followed by a dash, followed by more digits times 4. I think that's the new and improved version. Can you imagine how quickly and how complicated this can get? If you don't read it carefully, this is 3 digits. Actually, the dash needs to be inside. 3 digits followed by a dash. That whole pattern, the parentheses, repeated twice, followed by 4 more digits. I don't think it matters much which way we go, so I think I'm going to go with test because it just gives me no more information other than it worked or it didn't work. And so this starts with the pattern for the phone number dot test parentheses against my string, which is ptr dot value. And that didn't work. Not about, oh, got to refresh the page, Booker. And you got to save this one, Booker. Man, oh man, oh man. You guys need to hire a real instructor. Still doesn't like it. So I'm going to bring up my JavaScript and make sure that the rest of my logic, I forgot the not sign again. Brittany, you're supposed to keep an eye on me.
Shouldn't there be another dash in there somewhere?
No, there's only 2 dashes in a phone number. And my dash is inside the parentheses. I moved it. Move the dash inside the parentheses so it's multiplied by 2. That's better. And now it's looking at it. The downside to this, from my perspective, is I'm making the user type the dashes. What I could do is use the dashes and then try to format them. But I'd have to get into some different kinds of formatting that we haven't done yet. For phone numbers, I believe I have a format phone hiding someplace. It might be a PHP function that I wrote. Tim, do you remember? Is it JavaScript or PHP? I remember one or another called format phone that takes the phone number, strips off the first 3, adds a dash, stripped out the next 3, adds a dash.
PHP.
I think it's PHP.
We had to do that from front row.
Okay, let's say we want to have the area code surrounded by parentheses instead. Just as a good example. Well, then this pattern isn't going to repeat because my area code is now going to be surrounded by parentheses. So I'm going to take the repeating out. And I'm going to start with a parentheses and a \D curly bracket 3 parentheses. But I don't think that's going to work. I'm going to try it here. Why not?
Because using the parentheses to encapsulate the \D.
The parentheses have special meaning, right? This says that's a group, even though it's not even a 3 yet. That's a group. So the parentheses won't be recognized as a character that I want to match against, because the parentheses are part of the syntax of regular expressions. So if we go back to the syntax, parentheses somewhere, probably just in the description up here. There they are. Parentheses are used to group a group of characters. So the parentheses have their own special meaning. I need to add them to this chart. And so in order to use the parentheses, I have to precede them with the escape character, which is the backslash. And that goes on both of them. And notice how Greek looking that's starting to look now. And I think I want a space after that. Should be able just to put a space in between here and it should be okay. Now that space is required, just so you know, because we typed it, it's required. If I don't want it to be required, then I probably have to put a question mark after it saying 0 or 1. So we'll try that in a second. I'm going to save this and keep my fingers crossed. I do believe this should match a parentheses area code now, even though I still have a placeholder that says otherwise. Space. No complaints. Take out the space. Now complaints. So when you're testing these, the best test, it's not the only test, but the best test is to test one that works and the one that shouldn't work. But it's not the only test. None of these, I've added logic that says if you leave it blank, that's not very helpful because we're not testing things. What happens if I leave the parentheses out? Still not good. So this one seems to be working. But now let's say I want the space to be optional. I'm just going to add a question mark after the space. And just like programming, sometimes when you're building a regular expression, the best idea is to build it in pieces. Does it recognize my parentheses and 3 digits? Cool. Now a space. Now does it recognize the space as optional? Yep. Unlike most languages, regular expressions are sensitive to white space. Should be on one line. Can't put spaces inside to help things be a little more readable because then they become part of the pattern. Justin?
For something like a phone number, would you suggest taking the value, stripping out anything that's not a digit, checking to see if it's the right length, and then reformatting it?
That's another way to do it. But this is going to guarantee it's the right length, right? This lets me guarantee it's the right length, plus it has all the characters exactly where I want them. Me personally, in a database, I don't store extra characters in a phone number.
No, I'm saying to format it to show it to the user. So you take it, strip it all out, and then
Yes.
format it how you want it
Yes.
to look.
And I believe my unformat phone, I'll have to look around, but I believe my unformat phone has a formatting string that you get to designate, plus it has a G character that says unformatted. In other words, strip everything out that's not a digit to unformat the phone. And so often what we did is we would unformat it and then immediately .format it to change it to the format that we want. Harold?
Real quick, I'm having a hard time differentiating whether or not I'm supposed to use a parenthesis or curly bracket.
Curly bracket's a multiplier.
Okay.
Right, and so these threes, curly brackets only go around numbers. Might be a little hard to see there up on the screen, but those, all things around the numbers are curly brackets. Where parentheses are used as just as they are in most equations as groups, these things should be grouped, treated as a whole. Square brackets are used as optional characters. And we did that too. What if I wanted this dash to be either a dash or a dot? And put square brackets around it. And now we can use semi-European format and put a dash between the numbers or a dot between the numbers.
Backslash there.
I don't think I need to in there because it's in the group. because you wouldn't say any character inside of this group. So I don't think I need to. Let's find out. Because it's inside the optional square brackets, those are just characters. They can't be anything but characters inside there.
But now try putting an A there instead of a period.
So still seems to work, right? What happens if I put a backslash on it? Does it actually complain? I don't think so.
You might allow backslash. Backslash.
It might allow a backslash. Because I think within the square brackets, the backslash does not mean anything. Nope. So the backslash is still the escape character. You want a backslash, you got to double it. Okay. It's still the escape character, but within those square brackets, they're optional.
Because it's a multiplier. Right?
Where?
No, period is a multiplier. It's
Here?
Yeah.
No.
No.
A period means any character. If it were not inside the square brackets. But because it's inside the square brackets only contain characters or a range of characters.
Minus backslash. Minus backslash.
Minus backslash. If you want to put a backslash in there, and you got to double it up. So if I put a backslash in there, which would be really kind of goofy, then it would say, give me a dash or a backslash or a dot. Now it's acceptable. But that's the part that can get a little tricky when you're looking at stuff online. The experts, they know that they don't need to have backslash inside the square brackets. So they don't put it in, and you see that as any character. But that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Here's a list of characters, characters that I want you to choose from, either dashes or any character. Why am I choosing? And I'm pretty sure the question mark in here doesn't mean anything either. Or the plus sign. So within the square brackets, all those special characters don't mean a whole lot. Let's leave it at that as an example. Any more questions? Things you want to dream up? Okay, then we did that one. Area code optional. Oh, how do I do that? Take the entire area code, which is this guy, right? Actually, all of this is the area code. And make it optional. Notice there's a space that's optional. But really what I want this question mark all the way out here. So I need parentheses around the whole thing. The way I had the pattern defined before with the space on the outside, I was saying that a space at the beginning of my phone number is optional. That's not what I want to say. If you're going to include, now it says, if you're going to include the area code, notice the red parentheses. If you're going to include the area code, you may include a space after it or not. But if you're not including the area code, don't give me a space either.
What's the backslash at the beginning of it?
The backslash right next to my cursor right now
Yeah.
takes special meaning off the parenthesis
Okay.
because I want the actual parenthesis character. Another way I've seen that done pick from these characters, parentheses. But because it's inside the square brackets, it's no special meaning applied to it. I've seen that done where the special characters to remove, instead of putting backslashes on them, they put square brackets around them. Adds a character to my pattern, but I don't know that that's necessarily so bad.
Couldn't you just put a question mark after the parentheses?
No, because then the question mark becomes part of the pattern, and the parenthesis is part of the pattern. The parenthesis, we somehow have to remove its special meaning, and that's either with a backslash or by putting it inside a group. If I put a question mark after it, the question mark does it applies as a multiplier to the previous character, but it's not a character, it's a special code, and so it basically does nothing, I think. So now we should have an optional area code. Quick test. Doesn't like the space. Doesn't like it without parentheses. No, it's cool. I think that's a good place to take a break. Let's take a break. We'll come back and do a few more examples.